God'll get you for that one.
Maude is owned by Shout Factory.
God'll Get You for That, Walter is produced for entertainment purposes only.
Sponsored in part by Finley's Friendly Appliances. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fabulous episode of God'll Get You for That, Walter.
Which was uttered in this.
Yes, there was an utterance of
scene.
God'll Get You for That, Walter. I think during the first season, it was used pretty heavily.
Pretty heavily.
Even in the second season, it was used a little bit. Like, towards the third season, I think the viewers were just like, all right, we get it.
We get it.
We get it.
All right, now, before we go much further, who are we? And what are we doing here?
Sometimes I forget who we are.
I know, I do all the time. I need a mirror to tell who I am.
You need a mirror? I thought it was a simple little blue pill.
Well, sometimes that too.
My name is Tom Catt, and I am joined by the ever-fabulous and glamorous Miss Toni Homeperm.
Yes, I feel so glamorous today.
And, oh yes, in your tank top and shorts.
In shorts and nothing else.
I'm in my velvet pants and my
T-shirt and
flip-flops.
flip-flops. I know.
We are the height of glamour.
Stunning.
Height of glamour and sophistication.
Oh my.
Today we are finally discussing the episode that really made Maude a household name.
This is the doozy.
This was the two-parter. We're going to be discussing the first part today,
Yes.
and then next week we're going to be discussing the second part.
Because it's too much.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's definitely a lot to handle in one sitting. So the episode in question is, in fact, Maude's Dilemma Part 1. It was recorded, it aired on November 14th, 1972.
Yes, it did. And what a doozy.
What an episode.
And I know I saw this when it originally aired. I was just a little kid. I was because my grandmother watched the show. She didn't really.
I love the fact that you had a progressive grandmother.
She was. She really was. But I remember I didn't really understand what it was about. And I think I remember asking my mother, and I think she sort of explained it to me at the time, but Still didn't fully grasp it.
I mean, trust me, there are still dinosaurs in Congress who also don't fully grasp it.
This is true. And of course, the issue that we're talking about is abortion.
Yes,
a very
heavy topic.
Heavy topic for a sitcom.
Even for a sitcom in the 70s, that's still a very ballsy topic to discuss.
I mean, I don't even know of any. I can't even think of any other sitcoms that have dealt with the issue.
I think Roseanne dealt with it. Roseanne and Maude, I think, were the only two. Outside of those two, you have it mentioned in cartoons like Family Guy and American Dad. Like the Seth MacFarlane cartoons will sometimes mention it in jest or mention it in like sort of a black comedy kind of way.
Okay.
In poor taste.
Right.
Which is the brand.
Okay.
But yeah, this... When it comes to abortion in terms of Maude, it was handled in the most docile, delicate way imaginable. There really was nothing grotesque about it. There was nothing, aggressively in your face, like, ew, abortion, no, they handled it in a very professional, astute way.
Well, they hardly even used the word.
They used it once. The word was mentioned once out of Adrienne Barbeau's mouth.
Yeah, that was. Other than that, it was just they were
implying
it, making reference to it, but never actually saying the word. Probably because
you weren't able or allowed to say that.
They probably were. The network censors probably were only allowing them to say the word once. More than likely is what I'm guessing.
No, that had to have been the case.
Yeah.
That most assuredly was the case. And, it's still a hot button issue today, which, again, just leans into the idea that Maude needs to make a comeback. But even as much as Maude needs to make a comeback, there were still some very off-color jokes made during this episode's run.
Yes.
But it is an issue that we still have to address because this episode deals heavily with it.
And it's still a controversial topic.
Yeah, it's still a very controversial topic. As a matter of fact, before we started airing, I had told Tony that when I did Maude live, the first episode that I wanted to do, we ended up doing Maude's facelift. Part 1 and 2. It was still a 2-parter, but I wanted to initially do Maude's Dilemma just because it was a very hot button issue at the time. I mean, it still is, but at the time it was still being addressed in Congress. There were still proponents of people who were pro-life saying, well, you can't do that. And then there were these awful videos that were displayed, I think, in some argument against pro-choice. And just this episode aired, I think right before it became legal everywhere, before Roe v. Wade. It aired before Roe v. Wade. And then when Roe v. Wade was passed, they aired the episode again, and that's when the outpouring of like negative fan mail and positive fan mail all were sent to B. Arthur. But to talk about Maude Live for a second, I had addressed this with my cast, and my Vivian, my Summer Orlando, she turns to me and she goes, why don't we do something a little less controversial? So the fact that even my cast members are saying, let's not do something so controversial, only lends itself to the idea that this issue is still very much talked about and very much trying to be, it's still the topic of conversation that comes up.
Yes.
But in this house, we are pro-choice. We are very much pro-woman.
I've always felt that it's not a man's decision.
It's not a man's decision.
I mean, we don't carry the child. It's not our body.
It is not.
And unfortunately, it's a lot of typical white male patriarchy.
Might whale. That's, yep, there's that dyslexia. Rearing its ugly head.
I thought you were going Southern.
White male chauvinism.
Yes.
We can have an entire episode.
Yeah, well, we could talk about that for hours.
We most certainly could.
All right. But now, of course, we've gotten way ahead of ourselves. So let's
start at the beginning.
Start at the beginning.
A very good place to start.
So, Florida is bringing coffee out, I believe.
Yes, because tonight Maude is hosting the bridge game.
The bridge.
And she's hosting bridge for the evening. And this is actually the first... I mean, I know that we're getting ahead of it, but this was the first time that we were introduced to Vivian. Who was played by Rue McClanahan.
Her B. Arthur's...
B. Arthur's friend.
And of course, co-star from The Golden Girls.
The Golden Girls.
Yes. And now Florida starts... She's giving Carol mail, and she remarks that...
It's none of her business, but why is there MS in front of your name?
Yes, MS.
And MS stands for... Ms. And, that's still... I learned it in kindergarten, and it still confuses me.
Ms?
Ms, Mrs., Miss, they all confuse me. Because, you were taught Mrs. stood for...
A married woman.
Miss
was a single woman.
And Miss was a single woman.
And Ms. could be any woman.
Any woman.
And
almost like Mademoiselle.
Yes. And of course, for men, it's always Mr. Yes. Again, always the white,
white whale chauvinism.
Right.
White
whale.
White whale?
The great white whale hunting.
We're all little Captain Ahab in all of us.
Yes. I think I even have a peg leg somewhere.
Hollow leg.
I wish. But yeah, that very, very much, such a male chauvinist thing. A man is always Mr. You don't know if he's single, married, or whatever. It has no, his marital status is irrelevant to what he is as a human being.
Correct.
But a woman, it always had to be. Oh well, we need to know whether she's single,
married or single,
or single, by whether she's referred to as Miss or Mrs.
Mrs.
Yes,
and even today, there are new. Oh God, what are they called? Every time you fill it, a suffix. There are new suffixes coming out all the time.
Now there's MX.
MX for mix.
For mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to use Mix.
Would you?
Mm-hmm. I'd use it. I'd use it in a second, absolutely.
Okay.
I just wish that it was, you were able to put it on forums.
I'm sure eventually you will
Yes,
be able to.
more than one. In my lifetime. My lifetime.
It eventually happened with Ms.
Yep.
It'll eventually happen with MX.
MX. Yep,
So,
it will, and I'm very excited.
It's funny you bring up MX because I'm working on a drag competition that's going to be at New Bar.
Yes.
And, it's either going to be whoever wins, because it's open to drag performers of all,
all genders.
Of all gender.
And identifications.
Identification. So, they had initially said, who's going to be, Mr. or Ms. New Bar Superstar, and I edited it to be Mr. Ms. or MX.
Yeah.
Superstar, because I don't want to, I want to make sure it's, open to open to everyone, not, putting any labels, definitions, and boundaries like that. But so that was interesting. Florida,
Florida mentioned that, yes. And then she ends up saying, "But we've been calling you that for years, Ms. Carroll."
Yeah, Ms. Carroll.
A very I don't want to say a cringe line to utter, but very oh God, I want to use the right term, but I know I'm gonna muck it up. But it was a very interesting way of addressing that title. And I think I do think that they sort of lent themselves to use Florida in a sort of oh my God, why is the term is not Jim Crow. There was a specific type of caricature that lent itself to Black Americans, and I can't remember the term.
Step and fetch it?
No, it wasn't that. It wasn't.
It's a horrible term.
It was a terrible. That's also a terrible.
All these terms are horrible. By taking it with me wrong.
Oh my goodness! And it's a specific type of character.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I'll figure it out as soon as I get home.
Of course.
That's usually the case.
Of course.
But this type of character that they used Florida for was used a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And, the topic of race is something that does get brought up a lot when Maude is referenced. Because a lot of people... As a matter of fact, when I posted a video on TikTok, there was a few comments that were like, this woman was racist, this woman was anti-Black. And I go and I look back at the episodes and I'm like, I don't think Maude, as played by B. Arthur, is a racist character.
Right.
I think she is more and I hate using the expression, but a product of her time.
Yes.
Where you sort of, like, the writers only knew how far to go.
Right.
The writers did not know or understand that we would be in this sort of, endless civil dispute.
Right.
And... I feel like when I watch these things, I appreciate the writers for what they did, and I can acknowledge the wrongdoings that they did also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there was only so far they were able to go with network standards.
Correct.
And things like that. So if they wanted to
it's
pursue
also important to remember.
It's
also important to remember that I think it was after the first 3 or 4 episodes that they had to bring the scripts to the network censors. Because a lot of, like I had mentioned in previous episodes, B. Arthur and Norman Lear worked very close together when it came to writing this. And even Susan Harris. I think Susan Harris, who also wrote Golden Girls, wrote this episode, wrote Maude's Dilemma. So, they're all connected.
Yes.
And where was I going with that? I was going someplace with it. And then it just went away.
Oh, wow.
It went away. I'm sorry.
I'm sure it was a good place. I'm sure of it.
I bought the farm, really.
All right. So anyway, now Vivian comes in.
Yes.
And
it's also important to know that Carol came downstairs after giving her son Philip some ice cream because
he was sick.
He was sick and throwing up.
Yes.
I think he was sick with the flu or like a stomach bug.
Something like that.
Some of that effect.
Yes.
But Vivian enters and they made Vivian up to be close to Maude's age.
Yes, they made her look. She looks older in Maude than she did in the Golden Girls.
Wait, she looks younger later on in the series.
Oh, okay.
Like, that was the episode Maude's facelift is where Vivian goes to get a facelift.
Okay.
And it becomes this sort of conversation between what makes a woman and how a woman is supposed to look beautiful to attract a mate, all that fun stuff.
Of course.
But up until that point, Rue had very gray hair, very, very aged makeup, and it wasn't until, like, I think the last episode of Maude where we actually see Vivian transform into the Vivian that we know is going to be Vivian in the remainder of the series. Because this Vivian was very astute, very logical, a little sassy. But as the series progressed, they really dumbed her down.
Yeah, my recollection of Vivian was like she was
dumb. She was dumb. She was dizzy.
But she didn't seem like that in this episode.
Nope.
The characterization was quite
very different, very stark.
Where she went. Okay, so
and it's also important to know that character Vivian was originally supposed to be played by Doris Roberts.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Doris Roberts, who famously played Ray Romano's mother, whose name escapes me at the moment. What was the character's name?
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah, I
don't remember.
But
she was the mother.
I think she won an Emmy for that character.
Yeah,
actually,
I think so.
And Doris Roberts was supposed to play Vivian, but when Doris and B. Arthur were working off of each other, the network producers said they were too much alike.
Too alike.
That Doris Roberts was like a mini B. Arthur.
Yeah. And
they wanted someone who was able to play off of B a little bit better. Not better, because that's got a negative connotation, but someone that would be able to work well off of B. Arthur that wasn't an exact replica of Beatrice
Which
Arthur.
We already saw happen with the original actress who played Carol.
Yep.
Marcia
Rod,
who played Carol in
the first
All in the Family,
pilot episode
where Carol was supposed to be getting married.
Yep.
And we commented when we reviewed that Carol, Marcia's portrayal of Carol
was fiery, very quick-witted.
Yeah.
Whereas Adrian was a little bit softer. Softer, more feminine, we'll say.
Younger,
bustier.
Yes.
Has like Marcia Rod, for all that she had, for all her talent, Adrian had a curvier figure.
Yeah.
And when it came to Doris Roberts, like you don't want Maude to have another Maude. So Rue fit the bill, and
so Doris Roberts had to go.
And the rest is history. So we are introduced to Maude's best friend, Vivian. And Maude is not home. Maude is not home yet. Carol's starting to get worried and nervous.
Yeah.
And then as soon as Vivian brings up, "Where's your mother?" What's going on? Maude enters, bereft with grief.
Lord. Yeah.
Completely and totally destroyed by the news that she has received. She is hitting herself on the shoulder. She's hitting herself on the leg. When asked...
She's screaming at them to leave her alone.
Yeah, screaming at them to leave her alone. I think one of my favorite lines that she said was when Carol asked, "Mother, it's such and such a time. Where have you been?" She goes, "Carol, I'm proud of you. Only 28 years old and already you tell time."
Right.
I think that was one of my favorite lines in the episode.
Yes.
Maude is going on and on about how, she wants to be left alone, how she wants, nobody to bother her. And then as soon as they all say, "Okay, we'll leave you alone," she's like, "Don't you dare leave me alone at a time like this."
Yes.
And
also, they at one point, they told her, they were talking about Walter had called.
Walter was coming home from the airport.
He's taking a cab home.
Yep.
So we know where Walter is at, that he's basically on his way home.
And Carol ends up going upstairs to help Philip because she feels...
Check
on Philip just to make sure that he's doing okay.
Sick.
And Florida is preparing... I'm assuming she's preparing dinner in the kitchen. Doing her own thing. And now that Maude and Vivian are alone, Maude can tell Vivian what's going on.
Right. Because it comes out that they've been friends for like 22 years.
We've been through everything together. 6
husbands between them.
Maude's 4, Vivian's 2.
Right. And she's asking, can I trust you with my secret?
Also, that is the first time we ever hear that Vivian was previously married.
Oh, okay.
That was the first and only time, because after that we learned that Chuck was her first husband, and then Walter becomes her second husband. It's very weird how they design the character of Vivian.
Yeah.
Like they initially had this idea, and then they completely and totally rework the character.
Yeah, typical sitcom.
Which that's what happens in sitcoms.
Yeah.
So the episode continues.
Yeah. So Maude
Maude is finally going to tell Vivian what's going on.
And she tells her, I'm pregnant. And of course, Vivian is like,
doesn't believe
it's a joke.
She thinks it's a joke.
Right, she thinks she's kidding.
Maud, pull my leg.
Right.
Maud, please pull my leg.
Yeah, please.
And
Maud's telling her, the rabbit died.
The rabbit died.
Laughing.
Laughing. The rabbit died laughing. So, to those unaware, that joke, I think we mentioned it in like one previous episode, but what they used to do is they would take a woman's urine sample.
Right.
And they would inject it into a bunny.
Right.
And if the bunny died...
It meant you're pregnant.
It meant you're pregnant.
Yeah, so that was a big euphemism.
Yes.
For in movies and TVs for years, like, because they weren't allowed to say the word pregnant, but they could say the rabbit died.
Yep.
Because you think way back to I Love Lucy.
Yep.
When Lucy was having the baby on the show, they wouldn't allow them to use the word pregnant.
Nope.
You never heard the word pregnancy.
They ended up using the French term enceinte.
Did they? I don't even remember that.
There was the episode I think is called Lucy is enceinte.
Okay.
Because they couldn't use
pregnant. Yeah.
Or they couldn't use expecting. So they used that term as a filler. Because if you can't say it in English, you can say it in another language, and it'll be just fine. It'll be just fine. No one will be the wiser.
Well, that's funny because I remember on Star Trek: The Next Generation, Captain Picard saying "sacre merde," which is holy shit.
Yeah.
But at that time,
you couldn't say that.
Say holy
you couldn't
shit.
Say that, no.
But they let him get away with saying "sacre merde,"
and it's the same thing.
Yes.
It's the same thing.
So you could say just about anything you wanted in French.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, anecdotal. When I was in high school, I wanted to take French.
And why didn't you?
Because my father did not want me to.
Oh.
My father wanted me to take Italian.
Oh.
And we all know what a bum decision that turned out to be.
Yeah. I'm sorry I didn't take Spanish.
I am so sorry I didn't take Spanish.
Freaking use that now.
Yes. That's very bad. But I mean, I tell you, when I worked in retail, I would get a lot of Spanish customers, and I would try and speak with them. I mean, at times they would obviously ask "habla español," and I would be like, "Habla español, soy habla inglés." And at one point, I was like, "I have an idea. Let me use Google Translate on my phone and see what I can do." And it worked.
Okay.
It was able to work. I was not able to physically speak the language, but at least I had enough good sense to use technology. Thank God for it sometimes. But anecdotal, tangential, let's get back to it. You can say whatever you want as long as it's in another language.
I know. So Maude, of course, she's bereft. She's saying how she's going to be in a she's a grandmother. She's going to have a kid that's younger than her grandson. The uncle is going to be inheriting the nephew's potty seat.
At age 62, I'll be the mother of an Eagle Scout.
Right. And she's going to have to be dealing with Dr. Spock and
Spit Up and all that fun stuff that all mothers deal with.
Yes.
And
then now Carol comes back down, and
Philip's throwing up again.
Yes.
And then Maude says, "I better go and help him, or I better go and join him."
Right.
Because she evidently needs the practice.
Right. So I don't know how it gets decided that Vivian is going to. I don't remember how it's decided. Vivian is going to tell Carol what's going on.
Maude could not tell Carol because
that was
Maude was just so overcome with grief and
Yes.
and bereavement that she insists that Vivian tell Carol what the dealio is.
Yes.
And
And Vivian's like, now Carol,
And-
you remember when you were just a
Vivian-
little girl.
Vivian puts on this sort of like overtly cutesy baby type voice for
Yes.
some reason. Auntie Vivian, you know my mommy too. You tell her for me that I want a little brother or sister. It is the cutest thing in the universe, but Maude is like, I'm going to rip your throat out. I wish I had. Why did I? How are you my best friend?
Right.
And Vivian then tells Carol, your mother has finally decided to grant
your wish.
And Carol's just agog.
She's like, you're
what?
kidding.
You're kidding me. I can't believe that. I find that very hard to believe. And then she turns to Maude and says, Maude, it's not true. Mother, no, she said Maude, it's not. Did she say Maude or Mother, it's not true?
I think mother.
Mother. Yeah,
I think it was
that sounds
Mother.
about right.
Yeah. And she's like, how did it happen? It's sort of like- Nobody said anything, but it's like, hello, how do you think it happened? She's like, you're 47 years old!
Which, I mean, by today's standards,
Yeah,
that is still very young.
A lot of women, in their 40s are just having their first kids.
A lot of kids in their late
These days.
30s, early 40s, even late 40s, they're just having kids for the first time.
Very true. It's not.
I mean, it's not the norm now to graduate high school, get married, have a family. That idea is long gone.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's still. I'm sure it's still present in the Amish country.
Well,
I'm
I'm
sure
sure
it's-
they're
I'm sure-
married at like
yeah.
16.
I'm
and-
sure it's still mentioned in like communities where that is the norm, but
Right.
in today's society, it's a woman's world.
Yeah.
Where they can, make their own choices, do what they want to do, and then decide to have a child.
A lot of women, they don't want to have kids until they've already established a career.
Yeah.
Maybe already have the home, things like that. They want to have all those things first. It's set in place
it's
before.
almost this episode is almost the antithesis to the following episode, which is Maude's reunion
Mhm.
with Maude's friend Bunny
Mhm.
having the career and
Right.
having this sort of fabulous social life and not having a child
Right.
like as soon as she graduated, as soon as she left college.
Mhm.
But we discuss that later. That is a later topic.
Yes.
But it's really sort of important to understand that women during the 70s were treated like objects. Like they were only supposed to be there to be knocked up and to be barefoot and pregnant. I always say knocked up and pregnant. I don't know why. They mean the same thing, Tom. They mean this. It's dyslexia.
Now Florida comes in and she's sort of overheard the baby talk.
the baby talk.
She's like wants to know.
Is it Vivian having a baby? Is it Carol having a baby? And then she turns to Maude, and Maude just cannot look at her. And Florida is just my aching back. Why?
Yeah.
I think my second favorite line is her saying to Maude, "If you're sorry, I'm sorry."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it really sort of solidifies the friendship between Maude and Florida, in my opinion.
Right.
Because you obviously have this person that comes into your home 3 times a week,
Mm-hmm.
and you establish a relationship with this person. And if your employer is pregnant,
Right.
you obviously are going to have to either figure out payment plans and sort of prepare yourself for that conversation.
Yeah.
I know this is personal, but my mother has had to deal with that.
Oh,
Where
really?
where she's had to negotiate pay
Mm-hmm.
because her employer got pregnant.
Uh-huh.
So not only was she taking care of one child, now she's taking care of 2.
Yeah, that's twice the
So
work.
that's twice the work.
Yeah,
You need to. That's commonplace when it comes to being a nanny. If a person has another child, there needs to be that negotiation.
It's a lot more work.
So Florida, I think, is in a very tricky spot because not only is she their housekeeper, but now she also may have to be the nanny.
The nanny, yes. Or at the very least, she's going to be doing a lot more.
Or a nursemaid.
Laundry,
Yeah.
and everything. Washing,
More housekeeping,
bottles,
just
and
more
all that.
more work for Florida.
More. So now this is at the point where Carol brings it up. This is where it's first brought up that Carol says,
It's
legal.
legal.
You don't have to have the baby. It's legal now.
It's legal in New York.
It's legal in
Very
New York.
important to mention that it was legal in New York
Legal
State.
in New York. Yes. And of course, she doesn't actually use the word
She
abortion.
doesn't use the word abortion just yet.
We don't hear that word.
We don't hear that word until later in the episode.
Yes, later in the episode.
I think it's after Arthur and Vivian leave, and it's just Carol, Maude, and Walter having a discussion by the bar.
Yes, later. So now at this point, Vivian also brings up. She questions Maude. She's like, "You haven't told Walter about this yet either, have you?" And it's like, so we know that
we've established that Walter does not know.
He doesn't know. He doesn't know anything about what's going on.
I mean, at that point. During the 70s, if a 47-year-old woman was to have a child, it would be taboo. It would almost be a taboo topic. Like, how is this woman going to carry this baby to term? How is this woman going to be... how is this woman going to be able to manage this pregnancy being that age? Like 47, in another 9 months, she might be 48.
But now it's not... Even for that time, it's not like it was unheard of.
Yeah.
We have quite a few friends who were what they called then change of life babies.
Yes.
Their mothers were, the kids, in a lot of the cases, they already had grown children and in some cases, grandchildren.
Yep.
And they were pregnant and they were now having a kid who was, younger than, some of the
Younger
grandkids.
than some of the grandkids.
I mean, so it wasn't like it was completely unheard of. But it did happen. So now, I think we hear Arthur at the door. He's
at that
coming
point,
to play
Arthur
bridge.
comes to play bridge, and Maude is like completely and totally out of her mind. If Arthur finds out about me being pregnant, he'll laugh himself sick.
Yeah, so she doesn't want Arthur to know, and of
Yes.
cour's she opens the door,
And Walter laughs.
He's
and
already
Arthur laughs
laughing.
himself sick.
He's already laughing, and and she's like,
You bribed my gynecologist. How did you find
yeah,
out?
how did you find out? And
Arthur keeps on saying like how all I keep on picturing is Walter's face when you tell him the news.
Yes. Poor
Just
Walter.
he is sometimes Arthur is a terrible person.
Sometimes Arthur is just a dick.
Yes. No, that is the appropriate terminology to use for Arthur. Sometimes Arthur's just a dick. Sometimes Arthur is just a dick.
And there was a lot of everybody yelling all at once in this episode.
Yes.
There was a lot of
There
that.
was a lot of talking about
Cacophony.
cacophony.
I can see the word spelled in my mind.
Yep.
Pronunciation. Cacophony. There was a lot of cacophony.
So there was a lot
in
of
this episode.
definitely a lot of screaming over each other, which was definitely like families arguing. But even if you listen carefully, you can hear what some of the things that they're saying.
Right.
Like,
well, they start questioning Maude about what birth control was she using.
which a very astute observation to make, because Maude says, I don't take them, they give me migraines.
Grace of Hill.
And what a lot of people are learning is that there are some birth controls that will not work properly with the woman's body chemistry.
Oh.
And will end up causing them to have heavier flows, will end up causing them to have severe cramping and severe migraines. There have actually been a few friends of mine who are like, I need birth control recommendations because if they took a certain one, it would affect their body chemistry in such a negative way. Like even when I was in high school, there were some girls that were like, I'm on birth control, like I cannot do X, Y, and Z because I am not physically capable of doing that.
Oh boy.
And just the fact that was brought up and Maude saying, no, it gives me migraines, it was true. Because there were certain birth controls that just affected a woman's body chemistry in a very negative way.
Okay.
And it only makes me angrier where it's like, where's the male birth control? Vasectomy isn't the only answer.
Right.
So I have opinions on that.
Okay.
I have
You
a lot
should.
of opinions on that.
Well, you should.
And Arthur's like trying to shut down the conversation because he's just there to play bridge. He doesn't want to hear this woman talk.
Right.
Not that that's mentioned outright, but the way that it is implied is that that Arthur just doesn't want to have this discussion right now. He wants to play the game. And again, It's Maude's house.
Right.
Why are you, as a male figure, trying to dominate the conversation? Don't do that.
It's Arthur.
Because it's Arthur and he's a dick.
He's a dick.
Arthur. That's, yes.
So, Maud gets mad. She throws the cards. And Arthur has to bring up about, her having a baby in the autumn years of life. Yeah. just what every woman wants to hear, I'm sure. Oh.
If ever... No, I'm sorry. I would immediately kick you out of my house if you said anything that stupid.
Yes, the autumn years of life.
The autumn years of life. Arthur, leave it to you to make my pregnancy sound like a Hallmark card.
Yes, and then, of course, Carol starts bringing up about the point you just mentioned about why isn't there,
birth control for men?
And
then, I think Arthur says it's happening.
Yes.
Men are talking about vasectomies.
Yes.
And then Maude brings up, Walter's been talking about a vasectomy for 2 years. Take it from me, it doesn't work. Talking about it doesn't work. And that was, I don't want to say that vasectomies were a fad during the 70s, but they were definitely up and coming.
Yes.
And from what I understand, there are...
And they did have Mike get a vasectomy on All in the Family. I don't even remember that. So that was like the first time a character on a sitcom
yes,
got a vasectomy. I remember that very, very distinctly. Mm-hmm. It was just thinking about that is like as men thinking about anything. I mean, surgically down there, it makes you sit up straight in your seat.
Makes you sit up straight, makes you cross your legs.
But it is so much more of a simpler procedure.
It's a simpler operation.
For a man, it
is reversible.
It's but it's like an in-office procedure. They use a local anesthetic.
They use a local anesthetic. You don't even need to be put under.
No. And
whereas when a woman gets their tubes tied,
it's major.
It's
surgery.
an event.
Yeah, that's
Also worth noting, and I have read posts, I've read articles, I've tried to put my mind into some of these things that I've read. There are a lot of doctors who will not perform that operation on a woman. No, not a vasectomy, but they will not perform the operation of a woman having their tubes tied.
Really?
Unless they get the husband's permission, unless they get permission from a referring doctor. Yeah, oh yes,
that's ridiculous.
These are real things that happen to real women in this country.
I hope not in New York.
No, I don't believe.
I can't imagine them getting away with that in New York.
But I have definitely heard from.
I'm sure, heard in places like Mississippi or Tennessee,
absolutely,
Kentucky, the Bible Belt,
correct.
States you're gonna have.
But even so, it's a real thing that happens to these women that they need the permission of their husbands in order to, because the doctors will say, "Oh, well, you might change your mind. You might want to have kids at some point." And it's like, that's not your decision to make.
Right.
It is up to the woman, and that's the end.
Right.
So it's just... This country does not know how to treat women properly.
No, it does not.
But then again, show me a country that does.
Well, I think places like
Finland and Sweden,
those Nordic
Denmark,
countries are quite more.
They're more understanding and progressive. Yes, certainly more progressive.
Yeah, with the
But I mean,
hospital stay is like $20 or something like that. Or...
What was the joke that used to be made if a woman wanted to have an abortion, they would have to go to Mexico for an operation.
Right.
They would never call it abortion. They would never call it terminating a pregnancy.
Right.
They would call it going to Mexico to have an operation.
Or they went to Europe. On vacation or something.
Exactly.
Like that. Yeah.
So this episode was very, very, very progressively focused.
Because back in the day, like a poor woman, could, the only way to get an abortion would have to be like
back alley,
illegal,
coat hangers,
very dangerous.
However, there were a lot of women that even died because of those things.
Many women. However, if you had money,
if you had money, you can go and fly to those places and go.
Or a lot of times, the doctor would like just say, "Oh, they're just gonna make that it was it needed to be done for that the pregnancy wasn't viable or something, and it was a health risk to the woman or something like that, and and then they would do it. You know, for those who had
the means
money,
to do
means
it.
Yeah. So for them, you know, abortion was safe and legal because they had the money. But if you were poor,
I mean, it's the same thing that happens today.
mm-hmm.
It's very much the same thing that happens today.
Mm-hmm.
But Planned Parenthood is not funded by the government. Planned Parenthood is funded by private investors.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when we have people who are like, we need to defund Planned Parenthood, it's not up to defunding them. It's their funds come from other people.
Right.
Their funds come from the public. Mm-hmm. They don't come from the government. Right. So it's just, it just really confounds me. And I cannot tell you the amount of videos that I've seen on TikTok of people going to Planned Parenthood for cancer screenings, mm-hmm. for routine checkups. But every time a woman goes in there, people will throw... And these are crowds of people. Will throw pamphlets at these girls and will scream like, oh, you're doing something so sinful and so against God.
You're a murderer.
And it's like, how... Yes. Have you gone... I want to ask you people, have you gone into a Planned Parenthood? Mm-hmm. Do you know what goes on in there? It's not and sometimes abortions aren't even performed in Planned Parenthood.
Right.
They're performed outpatient, if I'm not mistaken.
Could be. I don't know. I'm not informed about it. But
it depends on the office. Certain offices will do inpatient. Certain offices will suggest outpatient.
Now, do you remember? Maybe you're too young.
I might be, but we'll find out.
Not far from us, on 347 in Hauppauge, like where the ShopRite supermarket is, on the other side of the road. There used to be like a clinic there. And there used to always be protesters standing out there with signs, anti-abortionists. I remember, I'm going back at least 20 years.
I know there's also the Planned Parenthood in Smithtown. Mm-hmm. Because I've gone to the office next to it when I've had an MRI.
Were there protesters standing?
No,
no,
there were never any protesters in front of that building.
Okay,
and it's in Smithtown, which is a pretty white suburban neighborhood.
Right.
But even so, I've never seen the signs. I've never seen people like...
Yeah, well, they used to be there.
Oh, I'm sure. But that's on a main road.
But that clinic, I guess it closed because they're, I don't know what's there now, but it's not, I guess it's not a clinic, but there's no protesters there. But they used to be there all the time.
Yeah,
every time we were going to
it was their job.
When we'd be going to the supermarket to see them.
Sometimes I just want to take a step back and ask these people, what is your day job?
Yeah, right.
What do you do for fun? Do you just go to places to make a mess of things?
Right. Yeah.
And
the other thing, too, is even if a woman is going there for a termination, for an abortion,
what business is it of theirs?
The last thing she needs to see are these people with these signs and yelling at them. And
I had a conversation with a family member, and she put it in very simple terms. I, as a male-presenting individual, could not know the guilt of going through with an abortion.
Of course not.
And I agree with her.
Yeah.
But it is not my place. It is not my place. It is not your place. It is not anybody's place to judge a person, because I am positive that the guilt a woman must feel going through with that is indescribable.
Sure.
It's indescribable.
And until you've gone through it, you'll never know what guilt feels like.
Guilt is mentioned in this episode.
Yeah.
Guilt is most assuredly mentioned in this episode.
Yes, it is.
So the episode does continue.
Yes.
And Carol ends up calling out Walter for his male chauvinism, which I love that so much. And as they're all arguing over each other, Walter enters.
That's when he comes in.
And
of course, they're actually arguing when he comes in. They don't even realize
he's walking the door
until he has to whistle, and they realize him there. And then he's going over to Maude, who's getting coffee, and he says, "How's my baby?" And she's filling the coffee cup, and she just keeps pouring it, and then it's overflowing. And that's when, I guess, the commercial break
they're in the commercial break.
took place.
And then he ended up saying, like, I have big news. I have big news for everyone. I'm going into Japanese appliances.
Walter has a surprise. Yeah, he thinks he got a surprise.
And he just tells everybody, I'm going into Japanese appliances.
Japanese appliances.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Outstanding. Was that a big thing in the 70s if somebody was outsourcing?
I'm trying to remember. I mean, I guess it might have been. It might have been.
Hell if I know.
I don't really remember.
I'm not a business owner, so I wouldn't know. But
well, actually, yes. Because in the 70s, that's when the auto market started getting overtaken by the Japanese imports. The Toyotas,
Mitsubishis,
the Nissan, the Hondas,
Subarus.
yes, all these Japanese imports were taking over. I remember that specifically because my father was a Ford car salesman at the time. And what happened was they were, back then, the cars were all these big, huge gas guzzlers. Because the gas was
boats.
only like
land
20,
boats.
I can remember like gas being like 25 cents a gallon.
Yeah.
Even less in some places. And so it didn't matter if your car was a gas guzzler because gas was so cheap. And then what happened was we had the oil crisis, and all of a sudden you couldn't, like, places didn't even have oil, like, to fill up your car, and then the price shot up. And the Japanese cars, because they were specifically built to be more economical with gas, all of a sudden now people were not buying the big, huge gas guzzlers. Everybody started buying these small, economic cars, Japanese cars.
Yeah.
And that, like, I remember, like, my father went from being, like, doing really successful selling Fords. All of a sudden, the market just fell out, and it was like he went from, like, he was, like, making nothing now. So, yeah, I specifically remember. So that
they don't teach you this stuff in books.
Yeah. So that was, I remember that. That was, like, that was a whole thing. And I can remember my mother having to, like, make an appointment to get gas for the car. Mm-hmm. And I remember, like, going on a line, like, to wait to get to the gas pump. That was, like, a block long. Mm-hmm. The only time I ever experienced that was, remember, after we had, like, the one big storm out here, and you couldn't get gas. I remember, but we only dealt with that for about a week or so.
Yeah,
I mean, this was like months. Yeah, it was quite something. So Maude has something to tell Walter, and she wants to get him alone in the kitchen.
And he proceeds to say, "Did you break the car?
Did you wreck the car?
Did you wreck the car?" Mm-hmm. And she proceeds to say, "Did you hear that, everyone? Did you hear that?
Right.
Not Maude, are you sick? Or Maude, are you, what was the other one?
Unhappy.
Maude, are you sick? Maude, are you unhappy? Maude, are you pregnant?
Yes.
No. Maude, did you wreck the car?
Yes.
So they go into the kitchen. Walter sits down and says, "Okay, are you sick? No.
No.
Are you unhappy?
No.
Are you pregnant?
Yes.
And as she says that, he's eating a chicken leg.
Chicken leg. And he starts choking.
On it. Now, take me through these steps. Mm-hmm. What doctor... Well, obviously, Maude leaves, and she leaves Walter choking. Didn't even look at him. Goes back out to play cards. Everyone's like, is Walter okay? How did he take the news? Like, everyone's asking the basic questions. Yes. And he immediately comes out, and he's like, pointing at his chest.
She tells her the blades are dull, and he
can't fit in the blender. Because Vivian was like, "Are you sure you should leave him alone in there? Like, right. He might do something drastic." Yeah. So he comes out and he is pointing at his neck.
That he's choking.
And, like, Maude is, like, waving at him, blowing him kisses, and, like, Carol's concerned, Vivian's concerned, Arthur's concerned.
Arthur finally says he's choking.
Yeah. Arthur finally says he's choking. Now, what doctor said to their patients, if you are choking, eat a piece of bread.
Give them bread. Yeah.
Who came up with that crock?
I think this was before we really knew about the Heimlich maneuver.
Fair.
So.
Yeah, because CPR and the Heimlich maneuver I don't think became in vogue until maybe the late 70s, early 80s.
At least, yeah, definitely. So certainly not when when it aired. I don't think anybody had ever heard of the Heimlich maneuver.
I don't think so either.
So I mean, I think, but you would think at least they would have been pounding him
banging on his back, or
it's like if you're choking, the last thing you want to do
is put more food down there
and block the airway. So
like
that was,
I don't understand because the reason why I bring that up, Arthur had said to Carol, get some bread from the kitchen.
Yeah.
And Walter ends up eating the bread, and he's fine.
Yeah.
And while he's choking, Maude says, I should never have brought up the baby,
right.
causing him to, start choking even more.
Yes.
Very overdramatic situation. Very, very melodramatic.
Yes. And he's still questioning, is it a mistake? Are you kidding? And I think he was asking Arthur, and Arthur tells him that it's not a mistake. The rabbit died.
Yeah. No, Maude said the rabbit died. There's no mistake. The rabbit died.
The rabbit died.
But Walter was saying to Arthur, doctors make mistakes. They make mistakes all the time.
Right.
And that was when Maude pulled him aside and said, no, it's real. This is an actual thing that's happening.
And that's when he goes to Arthur that he's going to be a 62-year-old father of an Eagle Scout.
And that's when Arthur loses his mind.
Yes,
and starts laughing hysterically.
And Walter's upset.
If my friend was in so much distress, the last thing I would do would be laughing in their face.
Yeah.
That again,
Arthur's
a dick.
Arthur is a dick.
Arthur's a dick.
Okay.
And that is the kindest way to put it.
I tell you, if we hadn't named this show, God Will Get You for That, Walter, Arthur's a dick. Could have been a potential.
Working title.
Could have been a potential
Speaking of Arthur is a dick,
yes.
As everyone starts to leave now because Vivian's like, Maude, I'm sorry, what can I say? And Arthur says,
yes. But before she left, Carol brings up again that she doesn't have to carry
she doesn't have to carry the baby to term.
She doesn't have to carry the baby. That's when, Vivian starts saying her goodnights.
Yes. And Walter says, try goodnight, Vivian. Goodnight, Vivian.
Good night, Vivian. So, Arthur wants him to look on the bright side, that if it's a boy,
he can carry on the name.
Carry on his name.
Maude says. Arthur, Walter's name from now on is Mud.
Mud.
You want your kid to be named Mud, you get pregnant.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And as Arthur leaves, he says something really uncouth.
What did he? I forget. What did he say?
Rotsa ruck.
Oh, he did. I missed that.
I remember the first time I listened to it, and I'm like, what the hell does he say?
Yeah.
And I rewound it, and he says Rotsa ruck.
That's
and
a very
anti-Asian
term.
Yes,
derogatory term.
Very anti-Asian phrase.
Yes.
And the idea that specifically Asian people do not know how to pronounce their L's is very racist.
Yes.
And again, point of fact, the show was written during the 70s, and I think that there was also the war in Vietnam going on, so jokes like that were the norm.
They were prevalent. I remember, my grandmother, when we were going to have Chinese takeout.
It wouldn't be called Chinese food.
No, there was a very derogatory term that we used, and my grandmother, she wasn't a racist. I mean, she welcomed anybody into her home. She was always nice to everyone.
Yeah. But
that's what she grew up
That's what
hearing.
she grew up hearing.
That's how it was. That's the term she always used. But
it's learned behavior.
Yeah,
it's learned behavior.
And
the best
terrible.
It is very difficult to unlearn something when it has been so ingrained in your personage for years.
Very, very true. But that was it was quite prevalent.
Yeah.
That to use anti-Asian terms and derogatory terms like that, and was not a good thing.
I mean, and then we have FNUQ with the song "Everyone's a Little Bit Racist,"
and
that features Asian stereotypes.
Yes.
It features
I forget the name of the woman who she's the college professor with the short white hair who does she's very famous for doing those the social experiments.
Oh my God! I know exactly what you're talking
CNN.
about. Yes,
I'm so sorry. I can't
we
remember her
can
name.
we'll address her in the next episode.
And she she's very outspoken about saying, "I am a racist."
Mm-hmm.
She says, people who'll say, "Oh, I'm not a racist." It's like, well, yes, you are.
Yes,
you are a racist. This is a racist country. We've all been brought up, believing racist things.
Yep.
There is no way to escape racism. She says, but it's better to say, I'm a racist, and acknowledge that and say, yes, I'm a racist, but I am going to work to unlearn these racist behaviors, rather than to just be like, I'm not a racist, and you continue to perpetuate the racist behavior. So, and it's killing me. I can't remember her name.
I'm going to look her up as quickly as possible.
Can you type any faster? Oh my goodness! But she's very famous for doing the experiment. She did it on
Jane
Oprah.
Elliott.
That's it. Jane Elliott. She's very famous. She did on Oprah.
She did the Blue Eyes Brown Eyes.
Blue Eyes Brown Eyes experiment, where they separated people
and
by
the
blue eyes,
crowd
brown eyes.
Erupted.
Yes, and like the blue eyed people who got treated
poorly.
When she pointed out to them, she said, you experienced racism for 45 minutes of your life, and you are so completely outraged and angered. She said, now imagine how a black person feels who's had to live that their entire life.
I think she even posed the question, how many people in here would want to live life as a black person? And nobody raised their hands. It's like, so it's that
racist.
Black people are. You know that this
racism.
community is being treated poorly.
Right.
What are you doing about it?
Right. So. But
we digress.
We digress. Of course, the main topic.
The main topic is abortion. But
abortion.
It's again one of those things where you have to acknowledge these things in these shows from this era. So as Arthur leaves, it becomes the big conversation of Maud and Walter having the conversation, and Carol being
wait. Walter is making them a drink.
And yes!
Maud wants a double.
And Maud wants a double because she's drinking for two.
She's drinking for two. Now that is something
you would never see
today.
You would never see in today's world.
If
you're pregnant, you don't smoke, you don't drink, you don't have any vices.
Yeah.
Because those chemicals can seriously affect the production of your child.
Right. So, although I think nowadays they'll tell a woman they can have like an occasional glass of white wine,
one glass of white wine,
but
nothing anything heavy.
It's really frowned upon. Because fetal alcohol syndrome is a real thing.
Yes, it is.
So
same with smoking.
Yeah, smoking. Although my mother smoked when she had me,
and we're all thankful for it.
But I mean, back then.
No one cared.
I'm in the in the 60s and before then, everyone smoked. You look at I Love Lucy; they all smoked.
Lucy smoked, I think, through the entirety of her pregnancy.
Yeah,
I mean, cigarettes, for all intent and purposes, were a sign of glamour, a sign of sophistication, a sign of status.
Yes.
And nowadays, they're more a sign of anxiety and cancer and all that fun stuff.
Yes.
So, again, product of the time. Drinking while pregnant was just...
No one thought about it.
No one gave it a second thought.
Well, at that time, I don't think they even I don't know if they didn't know about fetal alcohol syndrome or if it just was something that was not widely publicized, discussed. So you would not see a pregnant woman
with a glass of scotch,
with a double,
with a double of scotch or a double of bourbon,
whatever it was. Oh, so Carol again. She comes back down after checking on Philip, and that's when she actually uses the
Uses
word
the word
abortion. That's the one and only time it's said.
The conversation between Carol and Maude is very, indicative of their relationship as mother and daughter.
Mm.
It's a very good conversation between, these two figures, this mother and daughter, and it's just, I love how logical the writers made Carol. They made her a very logical, smart, intelligent, young 30-something, about to become 30, and they just made her so intelligent.
Yes.
And I'm so thankful that they were able to make this character as logical and as thorough, because in this instance, Maude can't be the logical one because it's physically happening to her.
Right.
And
now Carol goes on, this discussion. She's saying that, abortion it's legal in New York, where
before,
saying as women they're now they have rights.
Before, abortion was a dirty word.
It was a dirty word.
And it was dangerous and it was sinful.
Yes.
And it's not anymore.
It's as simple as going to the dentist. Although I don't know, not so sure about that, but she points out it's a single operation.
Simple operation.
I thought she said, did she say simple or single?
No, I think she said simple. It's
Simple?
a simple operation.
Okay, simple operation. Legal, it's safe, so if, it's an option that she's saying Maude has.
And even Walter was for it.
Yeah.
Like, Walter was even saying, like, this is an option.
Yeah, and he points out to Maude that, you've got one hell of a daughter.
Yeah.
And Maude is saying that, she feels silly, she's scared.
It's not fun having a kid who can beat you up the stairs.
Yes. But she also feels guilty about even considering abortion.
There was actually something that I caught that was interesting, because Carol had said to Maude, you were for it when they legalized it. And Maude says, of course, I wasn't pregnant.
I wasn't pregnant, yeah.
Which is something that a lot of people deal with when it comes to legislation that's passed. It's like, until it affects you, does it really become does it really become the law?
Right.
So we as queer people have definitely gotten our fair share of that. But as a woman, like, you want your rights. You want your rights to do what it is best for you and your body.
Right.
And
I sort of feel like, other women, even if they don't feel that abortion would be for them, I feel like they should still support other women to have, be able to make that decision. I feel as men, we wouldn't get it. We really shouldn't have a say in it because,
my ex had a similar mentality. It was just like, it does not affect me. It is exclusively a woman's issue.
Right.
And however, the only reason it is a woman's issue is because a man's sperm created the embryo.
True.
And it really becomes a very messy issue as soon as religion's involved, which is the big argument that a lot of people use for being pro-life. And it's you're not pro-life, you're anti-woman. Yeah. It's as simple as that.
Right.
And I feel like more people need to understand that distinction.
Yes.
Which, they don't because they're so wrapped up in their own self-righteousness.
Yep.
But
why is it that, the religious right, they want to, protect the fetus so much,
and then as soon as the baby is born, it's okay.
Yeah.
That's it. You're on your own, kid.
And are not that concerned with children that are in cages either.
Because it's about control.
Control.
It's exclusively about control. It's about men controlling a woman's body and a woman's right to choose. And it is disgusting the lengths that some people will go through to have power.
I also feel it's also an additional way to keep people in poverty.
Very much so. Because, I mean, even so, like, when Maude was discussing it with Vivian, Maude was saying, I was thinking of having the couch recovered, I was thinking of having the sofa redone, I was thinking of having new carpeting, I was even thinking of having my eyes done.
Right.
Like, she was thinking of all of these financial expenditures that are obviously not going to go to the house or her face, but to this child.
Right.
And babies are an expenditure, and it's a conversation that a lot of people have, where it's like, can we afford to have a child? Right. And
realistically, no one can afford to have a child.
Not in today's economy.
Yeah.
Not in today's. It's very challenging to have a baby in this day and age.
Oh, you sound very Lauren Bacall right now.
Good taste is easy to recognize. That's just it. A woman with a smoky voice. That's
you know how to whistle, don't you?
Just put your lips together and blow. So Walter decides I'm going to have the vasectomy.
Right. Yes.
Walter ends up deciding that he's going to have the vasectomy, and the same conversation between Maude and Carol. Carol goes upstairs to check on Philip, or goes into the kitchen because Maude tells her to go into the kitchen.
Right.
And Walter decides to have the vasectomy. And, Maude says, it's like going to the dentist, which is exactly what Carol only just told to her.
Yes. And that's when they're hugging.
Yeah, they hug, and they've come to the discussion, I think, is going to be put off until tomorrow.
Yes, and Walter's patting her.
Walter's patting her. She
says,
Walter,
don't pat me there.
That's how we got into this mess in the first place.
Yes.
And then the epilogue.
Next morning, in the kitchen, Carol and Walter are having coffee, I believe.
Yes, they're having coffee. And Carol's like, I wonder how was mother able to sleep? Like, I wonder if she got any sleep. She's probably exhausted today. And Walter's like, no, she slept like a log. She slept soundly.
Right.
And then Maude walks in a very frumpy frock.
Yeah.
Very much sort of
a
robe tunic type situation. Just very, and it was denim. It was dark blue or dark.
It almost looked like Battleship Gray.
It was very ugly.
It was not pretty.
It was not an attractive outfit.
It was not pretty. It would not go with any shoes I own.
Not in the slightest. Absolutely not. I would not wear gunmetal gray. To my morning coffee.
No. No.
So she says, I don't want anybody to knock this dream out of my head.
Mm-hmm. She was the heroine of
a soap opera, There's Always Tomorrow, where she was born someplace fascinating, married an Italian nobleman, and at age 47 she got pregnant. And that's where it ends.
And we know it's going to be a part 2.
There's a part 2.
This is actually an episode where they show
clips from the following episode,
the next week's episode.
And man, oh man, what?
I'm exhausted just having.
Having gone through that episode. There's just so much to unpack. And again, one of the beautiful things about the writers is that they packed these episodes with so much information. Like, I was watching The Nanny, and I've been watching The Nanny a lot. I've been watching The Nanny and Bewitched, 2 sitcoms that I wish I had on DVD.
Right.
And I was just watching them, and there's a lot of fluff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fluff in those episodes.
Yes.
When you look at Norman Lear's episode, there is something in every single episode.
There is a lot of meat.
So much meat. Not many potatoes, but a lot of meat in those episodes.
Yeah.
And Maude is absolutely 100% no exception to the rule. Like, there is just so much to unpack specifically in the first season of Maude. Like I've mentioned in previous episodes, when we get to like the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th seasons, there's a lot more comedy.
Okay.
There's a lot more comedy. There's a lot more. I think it was also because like towards the end of the first season, people were just like, "Can Maude not be so serious?" Like, and I mean, one of the beautiful things about this episode is that there are nuggets of comedy.
Right. Like,
it's not entirely devoid of humor.
Right.
But like in the 2nd, 3rd, especially when Mrs. Naugatuck is brought in, it becomes so much more what you would see in sitcoms today.
Right.
Like, there's still issues brought up, but it's far more comedy than serious conversation.
Right.
So In the first season of God Will Get You for That, Walter, there's going to be a lot of serious conversations, and this episode is certainly no exception to the rule.
Yeah, well, this stands out as the most controversial.
Yes, I want to say it's one of the most controversial next to the episode where we go over Walter's drinking, which is actually, I think, at the beginning of season 2.
Yeah.
Literally the first 2 episodes of season 2 is Walter's alcoholism. But, yeah, Maude's Dilemma Part 1 and Part 2 are probably the most controversial episodes of Maude, and they are the reason why so many people know that Maude was this person, was because of Maude's Dilemma. And there was even worry when casting for Golden Girls, because they thought that B. Arthur was just going to bring Maude to the Golden Girls.
That sort of controversy?
And that was why they were, hesitant. But when Rue was like, the part was written for you.
Right.
They wanted a B. Arthur type.
Yeah.
And, what are you doing? Why are you, not joining this crew of people? And the producers were nervous to bring B. Arthur on because of the Maude controversy.
Well, fortunately, they did.
They got her on, and now we have 2 fabulous sitcoms starring Beatrice Arthur. And I, personally, could not be happier.
Yeah, it gave you a career.
You bitch. It did, though. That's the funny part. But thank you so much for joining us on this marvelously controversial episode of God Will Get You for That, Walter.
And, of course, they have to join us for next week's
episode. Join us for next week's episode of God Will Get You for That, Walter. We will be discussing Maude's Dilemma Part 2.
Part 2.
My name is Tomcat, and you can follow me on all forms of social media at ThatTomcat and ThatTomcat.com. If you would like to follow my fabulous co-host, you can at
ToniHomeperm.com. That's Tony with an I. And, of course, they can always follow God Will Get You for That, Walter on Facebook and on Instagram.
And on Instagram at Findley's Friendly Appliances. Please feel free to email us, comment us, chat with us. We are always welcoming, topics from the fans.
Of course.
And we're always looking for new people to, become friendly with.
And, of course, the email is also...
And our email is findleysfriendlyappliances@gmail.com.
Yes, very good. You'll get a gold star.
Oh, how nice. I'm a real student with real ambitions. But thank you so much for listening. For listening, not watching. Thank you so much for listening. We watched each other, and we watched
They get to listen to us.
But thank you for listening, and we'll see you on another episode of God Will Get You for That, Walter. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.